When I was in high school, my uncle would throw me a couple bucks to help babysit his kids with my aunt. They lived in a 2-story house by the water. Nice area. The kids were about 3 and 6 respectively. One day, I was sitting in their den on my phone when I started to hear a baby crying. Thinking it was a 3-year-old, I headed to the bottom of the stairs to check and see if my aunt was up there dealing with it. I called for her a couple times with no response. The baby kept crying. I called for her one more time, and when I got no response, I started walking up the stairs. Then I heard my cousins and aunt playing outside. All the hairs on my body stood up, and I literally felt a chill run down my spine. I quietly turned around, walked down the stairs, got in my car, and drove away. The baby was still crying when I closed the door behind me. A few years later, I was drunk at a family party and told my uncle the story. He told me that he and his wife used to hear the baby too, and apparently, the previous owners had a kid die of SIDS in that room upstairs. He's uber Catholic and had a mass said for the baby. He said after that it never happened again. Still gives me the willies when I talk about it though. I was 13 years old and drinking lemonade with my best friend in the kitchen. We were alone. From where we were sitting, we could see a corridor that leads from the front door to the backyard. We were talking and something made us shut up. We looked to the corridor, and there was a shadow of a man walking by with a suitcase. I know she also saw him because we both described the same thing. A tall shadow with a suitcase. Fast forward to a few years later. I had to do a school project with another girl. Again, I was alone at home, working on the computer when she arrived. She then asked me where my dad was. I told her my dad was away at work. She asked me, well then, who's the man I saw walking downstairs and carrying a suitcase when I came in? So far, no one else from my family has seen him. I haven't seen him again ever since, but for a while, it really scared me to be home alone. Used to work hospital security, and we had video cameras accessible in the office. During body escorts, we kept finding the morgue doors open. That was weird, because it was a heavy door that could only be opened with a key card. Pathologists were blaming security, and security was blaming pathologists for leaving it open, as we were the only 2 groups with access. I did a body escort one day, made sure to close the door behind me, and went back to work. Not even a half hour later, the office got a call complaining that the last guard left the door open. I swore up and down I didn't, and went to check the cameras. The camera showed me pulling the door shut, pushing on it, and then wiggling the locked handle to ensure that it was closed. I wasn't even out of frame from the camera yet before we could see the door swing all the way open, hit the wall, and then slowly swing shut until it was slightly ajar. Not me, but a friend who was a pilot. She stayed at an older hotel downtown Chicago and was studying for her recurrent class, which was in a few weeks. While at the desk, deep in thought, she heard people talking and laughing. When she looked up, it got quiet. She said it sounded like it was in the room with her, and she went back to studying. The noise started off softly, and then again sounded like a party was going on in her room. She got up and looked around, and there was silence. There were no sounds coming from any rooms, no televisions on, no radios, no people in the hallway. The noise was definitely in her room. That night, around 2 a.m., she was in bed and felt someone brush strands of hair from her forehead and tuck it behind her ear. She jumped up and turned on the light, and there was no one there. She didn't get back to sleep and bid around that overnight so she wouldn't be in that hotel again. When I was little, I saw a recurring ghost. She would appear for a split second and then vanish, but I could always perfectly recreate the image. She was a short little girl wearing a frilly blue dress and big red bow, blonde hair, blue eyes, large ears. A couple of notable sightings were her looking through my mom's jewelry box, and one peering through our glass door at me, with her hands over her eyes, binocular style. It never really bothered me, and these happened for a while. A few years later at my grandfather's house, and we were helping him unpack his attic, and I found a portrait of his long since deceased sister. Not quite the same dress, slightly different bow, but the face was absolutely her. She had died as a child quite tragically, so obviously I had never met her. But I did know of her and had never seen a picture of her before. So not a scary supernatural encounter, but rather a heartwarming one, knowing the great aunt I never met was saying hello. I worked for my church for 2 years. One day, a coworker and I were closing up the church at the end of the day. By this point, doors were locked, and we had checked every room to make sure no one was in the building. The church had 2 lobbies, one in each side of the building. They were connected with a long hallway lined with classrooms. As my coworker and I were turning off lights and double-checking the doors in one lobby, I looked down the hall and could distinctly see a boy, late teens to early 20s. He was in a blue plaid short-sleeved shirt and khaki pants, sitting in the chair. He had his hands folded and was looking at the ground as if in deep thought. Initially, I didn't think anything of it, as this wasn't an uncommon sight. I turned, and in the second it hit me that we were the only ones in the building. I turned again, and there was no one. From the time that I saw him to when he disappeared, all happened in about a second or two. I told my coworker what I saw, and we both got out of there quick. Being that this is our first unexplainable, potentially supernatural experience, we were both pretty freaked out, but we never felt threatened, nor was the presence malicious in any degree. I worked in a maximum security prison for a while. I was assigned to Central Control one night, which is where the camera screens were. One of the cameras was for the classifications room. I glanced at it, and there was an inmate in there. This was super odd, because it was 2 a.m, and nobody was supposed to be in there. Everyone that had keys to that room went home at 5. Anyways, so this inmate is just sitting in there doing nothing. I got the sergeant's attention and told him someone was in there, and gave him the spare key to the room. He went to go check it out with a couple of other people, but by the time they got there, the room was empty. They searched for like 15 minutes, but there was definitely no one in there. My colleague used to work in a hospital and would often receive phone calls at around 3 a.m., but no one would speak at the other end of the receiver. The number was from an extension somewhere in the hospital, and when they looked it up, it was from an old morgue. Nobody has used it in a while. When I was about 12, our family moved into a new house. New to us. Actually, it was quite old. It was in our same village, but down a different lane. Part of it used to be a bungalow, so my room and my sister's room were on the ground floor, down a long hallway. All the ground floor had walnut flooring, and there was a Persian rug outside the door to my room to avoid cold toesies in the morning. Every night, around 11 or so, I would hear footsteps, walking at a fairly slow pace, right down the hall, from the end guest suite, up past our rooms, and away down the hall to the living room. I was always in bed when I heard them, and so was everyone else. You know how you can tell who a family member is by the way they walk up the stairs, or open a specific door? I knew it wasn't anyone in my family. Plus, it was the sound of outdoor shoes clacking on the wood, and everyone in the family wore slippers inside the house. I would hear the footsteps start, fairly loud on the wooden floor, way down the hall, come up past my sister's room, and then there would be a pause, while whatever it was walked over the rug. You could hear the gap in the footsteps, about 3 seconds. Then they would start again on the other side of the rug and fade out as they walked down the hallway to the living room. Then they would come back, same footsteps, break across the rug, resume on the other side. I don't remember ever feeling scared, but I never, ever went out to see what it was. I would fall asleep to the sound. It would go on for a really long time. It stopped about 3 or 4 weeks after we moved in, and I never heard it again. I didn't really think much about it after it stopped, but I've never forgotten it, and as an adult, it makes me shiver to remember it. Hey everyone, Dismal Hero here, and I'd like to thank you for checking out the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, like and share the video if you enjoyed it. I'm always looking for new and exciting stories, so if you have a scary encounter that has happened to you, please email it to me in the link in my description. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you back here again next time.